Please type in. Here's the live stream. I saw Lily last night. It's funny. Please type in the chat if you can see and hear us. Okay, here we go. Are we good? Is it you two or is it three?
It's meant to be three of you.
There we are. There. How's that?
But if it ends up being only two, well, so silly.
Guys, if anyone needs the bathroom, the best one is just down there. And there's another one over here. Bathroom. Oh, I don't think I would find that one. But it doesn't know you're judging. I'm going to
Yeah. Oh, it's Tuesday. That's right.
Don't tell anybody else that.
Who was the parent?
Me, Brooke, and Frankie.
Actual real, like, could you have the high solo type? The high 24/7. That wasn't really.
Wellington College.
The Zoom as well.
Who's in the team? Who's speaking in what order?
First speaker is Nickel Cox.
Nickel.
No, Nikhil.
Nikh. Oh, Nikhil Cox. Yep.
Our second speaker is Zach. Wait, Zach, how do you spell your last name?
Oh, it's not here because I couldn't.
Zach. B-U-Y-C-K.
E-U-Y-C. How's that said? Buick. And
Arthur Fell.
Arthur Fell.
Yeah.
And is Nicole doing the?
You don't lead us right, Nicole.
Right.
If you're going to work on your computers, you probably only really need one of these, don't you?
Yeah.
Just so that you've got a record. Will you do separate ballots, or will you just confer?
Yeah, well,
I think so. Nah. Well, they might. You know, they take it terribly seriously at this level. So.
Okay, yeah, well, we'll consensus on it, we'll make it nice.
Righty-ho. It's 4 to 6 minutes and 2 to 3. Sarah and
Peter.
I did know that. Peter. I can never quite remember everyone's names when you all appear at once. So.
Yeah.
So Sarah and Peter, thank you.
Social being in preparation. I tell you, I look at my first transport now. Chief executive of the chap called Peter Moss, and they set up one-on-one with the chief executive. So we had a meeting and the State Services Commission, who's Peter Moss, and whoever set up one of the made it Sarah McKeown and it's just like, I don't know why. And so I turn up to meet him. And he's like, did you say that? And I was like, yes. And he's like, you know who it is? I was like, yeah, you can say it. So you know, Peter's successful.
We've had a very stupid thing.
Sorry?
We've had a very stupid thing.
Uh-huh. Oh my God, truly.
Some of the really good boys are
Oh, heartbreaking.
horrible. Motorbike up and down the corridor. Outside my classroom. Problems. I got all of them in my classroom with the door shut. We had a camera. We had just
Oh my God.
really bad.
My voice was like this, Peter.
Why I've always made this. Indeed.
Scots never did that at all. Every year we would mysteriously have
Oh, we're on live. I better
candles and
stop talking. Oh, hello. Can everyone hear me moaning at my own school? Is anyone here? No one's here. Does someone want to check the live stream and see if any parents are on? See if your family's on.
And what are you doing for the summer?
I didn't get any earring conflicts okay, so I'm studying today and
Oh, fantastic. At VW?
Yeah.
Very nice.
very good.
Good way to spend the summer. Both halves summer, which are Christmas.
Yeah. Well, today I got halves and some on this.
Are the grammars pretty similar though?
I haven't gotten far enough into them yet, but there are definitely some of their similarities. I think enough differences that it's
Learning two languages at once, is that easier or harder?
so full disclosure, I'm also learning Spanish, Latin, and Mandarin on my phone.
Duolingo?
Yes,
It's
love
me.
it. Love it.
I'm teaching German for the first time in 9 years.
Oh,
So my main
nice.
teaching subject is maths, but I finally just mute myself. You're Thompson? Okay, guys, can you, is it working? Can you say something in the chat to see if it's working?
I don't know how to do that.
Oh, you'll see judges here.
Oh,
Again.
oh, wow. Look at this.
Oh no, I'm in the middle. No.
Crash.
Oh, truly, where? Oh my gosh.
Oh,
That's so good. Well, you made it just on time.
Hi. Oh yeah. Good. How are you? Good, thank you. Like this one.
Oh, no. No. What's your name again? Florence. I did know that, Florence. I do know that. Okay, thank you. This is great. Do you need a sheet?
Yes, easily do that.
I think you could just convene afterwards.
Yeah, that's what I'm like.
Yeah, I think so. But that's there for you, for your names and the notes and all of that sort of thing. We'll get started if you're all ready.
Good.
Kia ora, people. I think we will make a start because it is 5:31. At long last, we have our Junior Prem Motivation Final. My name is Kathy Ryan. I'm the convener of this grade. I have convened this grade for something like 27 years, I think, now. And every year, I really enjoy it. We've had a grade of about 20 teams, 21 teams, something like that this year. And we are down to our last people standing, who are the team from St Mary's and the team from Wellington College. So very, very well done to these young people and to their coaches and all the supporters. Tonight's debate is the moot is that we should remove all internal assessments and all high school courses and only use external examinations. Affirming the moot is St Mary's, and the speakers on that team are Olivia Knapp, the first speaker, Isabella Cash, second, Yesania Fernando at third, and Isabella will do the leader's reply. From Wellington College, we have Nicole Cox in first, Zach Buick, second speaker, Arthur Bell is third speaker, and Nicole will do the leader's reply. These teams are competing for the WGT Weeks trophy, which is sitting there in front of our adjudicators. That has been debated for since 1974. It's one of the oldest of the Wellington Speaking Union trophies, certainly the oldest of the junior trophies. Our adjudicators tonight, whom we thank very, very much, all from Wellington Speaking Union or accredited adjudicators. We welcome Sarah and Peter and Florence, who are going to adjudicate tonight. The way that they're going to do it is that they're going to adjudicate individually, but they will confer at the end. And then one of these brave souls, will report back and let you know the outcome of the debate. And we welcome all the people who are watching us on the live stream tonight. And huge thanks to Wellington College for making this possible for us. So without, we're looking at speeches of 4 to 6 minutes for your substantive speeches and 2 to 3 minutes for your replies. And so without further ado, I would like to ask Olivia to open the debate.
3 years of stress and anxiety, battling bias and high workloads, constant pressure to perform, and at the end of it, a qualification that many don't trust. This is our current assessment model, a model that started with great ambition, but in reality is hurting our tamariki. Today, the affirmative team will prove beyond doubt that we should remove internal assessments in all high school courses and use only the external examinations to improve education for both students and teachers. We will be using the NZQA definitions. Internals are tasks assessed by teachers during the year, and external assessments is assessed by NZQA at the end of the year, for example, in an exam or a portfolio of work. Our model of external exams would include taped performances and other forms of assessment necessary for subjects to be assessed externally. We would maintain the standards-based system so students could continue to focus on areas within subjects, and we would not simply be returning to past assessment systems like school certificate. I will address 2 of our team's points. 1, that internals are biased and inconsistent, and 2, that externals better reflect student attainment. At second, we will illustrate how our model will improve the education experience for teachers and students. Our current system leads to unfair assessment. According to the 2019 NCA report, internals make up roughly 2/3 of assessments. This is problematic because internals are intrinsically more inequitable than externals, with issues occurring in the setting, marking, and teaching of internal assessments. Firstly, setting. Under the current model, teachers generally set internals. This leads to 2 issues. Firstly, some teachers set tasks designed for their students to achieve highly because they want their students to do well and because good performance reflects positively on them. This leads to an inconsistent level of difficulty across the country and within schools. Some students will benefit from having a teacher set a favourable assessment, others won't. This means grades become reflective of the task set, not of the student's ability, which is unfair. However, under our external model, all tasks will be the same for all students nationally, so the difficulty level would be equal. Another way the setting of tasks becomes unfair is through unconscious bias. The teacher may, for example, make assumptions, use language, or ask questions that are influenced by their personal experiences that students can't relate to, leaving those students unable to perform to the best of their abilities. This would not occur under our model, as tasks will be vetted and set with care to ensure students receive a fair deal. Secondly, teaching to assessments. A review of NCA by Samuel Peno found, because internals are set by teachers, many are teaching to tasks. Students are taught exactly what is going to be asked in assessments, allowing them to pass without a deep understanding of the topic. On top of this, the predictable nature of internals means students can easily cheat, handing in work from siblings or friends from other schools that completed a similar internal. Under our model, these issues will not occur because teachers would not know the content of externals as they wouldn't be setting them. They would have to teach the broader topic, ensuring their students have a deep understanding of subject matter so they can succeed regardless of external content. Thirdly, the marking of assessments. This is when things get really problematic, largely due to teacher bias. An analysis of 20 studies on grading biases found that students who had unfavourable qualities received 4 to 5 marks less out of 100 than students who had favourable ones. These so-called favourable characteristics include gender, personality, or socioeconomic status, and are determined by a person's internal biases. Most common biases are based on race and impacted by teachers applying bias and racial stereotypes to their students. One 2017 study proved that this issue is present in our education system. Māori systematically receive lower overall teacher judgments, even when their standardised achievement scores were the same as other students. Unfair, discriminatory marking of assessments or grades that are more reflective of bias or expectations than students' actual work won't occur under our model, as students' work will be marked by people who only see the work. Our second argument is that externals can more accurately reflect student attainment. Internals are not effective in reflecting students' true abilities because of the inequitable nature of them and the ability to teach to assessments. According to NCA results, our students are achieving higher than ever as the number of internals increase. However, this perceived increase in achievement is not matched in PISA, a respected international evaluation. New Zealand's PISA results have actually decreased as the number of students receiving excellence in NCA has increased. This shows us that internals are not giving us accurate grades, which led to a loss of trust in the qualification, with Victoria and Auckland universities requiring extra or specialised credits, specifically externals, because they don't trust internal assessments. Today, I have shown you some of the reasons why the system we have is too broken to fix, and proved that to give students a fair, nurturing, and effective education, we must use exclusively external assessment. The moot must stand.
Thank you, Speaker, for this speech, and I'd like to invite Nicole to open the meeting.
The opposition has tried to show that by removing externals, we'll have a utopian education system with no bias and everything's all equal. Yet we on the negating team completely disagree. I'm the first negating speaker, and I'll show that internals improve the quality of student education. I'll prove that 1, internals force the students to study and learn across the year instead of just cramming at the end. And secondly, internals provide a greater diversity of knowledge, a more holistic view of students, and they're a fairer system of testing. My second speaker will elaborate on my arguments and rebut some of the opposition's points, and my third speaker will conclude our arguments and rebut the opposition. So, firstly, we as a team do accept that NCA does have flaws. There are problems. What we do not accept is that we need to completely remove internals. There needs to be some reform, yet we don't need a complete upheaval. Now, I'd like to move on to some of the rebuttal from the first team. So, you talked about how teachers set easy tasks so they look good, and the students' grades are more about what they're actually being set. So, firstly, all the assessments that's actually happening under all the internals, they are being double and triple checked by other teachers, and NCA can look in and check and monitor these standards to ensure they are fair. Furthermore, when you talk about racial bias, you use GCSE statistics. You use statistics that simply aren't relevant to the New Zealand education system. We're talking about British standards, not New Zealand standards. Furthermore, with teachers, when they actually, we ask this report about as a maths teacher, he doesn't actually look at our names. He marks the work blind and then puts the grade in front. So he doesn't actually know whose work it is. Furthermore, all of this work, it's being double and triple checked by other teachers, other markers who don't actually know who you are. So, I'd now like to move on to my substantive. First, I'll provide a characterization of students. We see that the vast majority of students' interests will only be in a small range of academic subjects. Mainly, their focus will be on more social and traditionally enjoyable subjects such as gaming or sports. So without any other motivation, students will only learn a few subjects that actually interest them. This is where test comes in. Students study hard in class and outside of class because they want to get a desirable grade. This could be because they want to impress their parents, avoid punishment, or they simply enjoy getting good grades. Either way, this provides students who otherwise wouldn't learn with the motivation to do so. Even if we didn't have tests to motivate students to perform in less enjoyable subjects, they wouldn't learn the important material. Take English. At WC, it's nearly universally despised. And if possible, most students wouldn't pay attention in class or study it all outside of it. But students study so they can get a good grade, so they get a passing grade. This means while they may not enjoy having to study it, they still learn the vital skills they'll need for the rest of their life. So if we were to remove all the internals, what's going to happen? Well, there are two things. Either we can put them at the end of the year. What happens? With no test to motivate students across the year, they won't have any reason to study. So come exam season, they will be as knowledgeable. They like to cram more than students under the current status quo would have maintained a baseline knowledge across the year because of the internal spaced across it. As a result, when they cram, when the exams are over, they'll forget all the material, thus creating more work and stress for teachers and students alike next year, and there's a less educated student population. Even if there were fewer tests for the subjects that would be covered by internals who are not assessed or not taught, students wouldn't have any incentive in the absence of tests, so they won't put in any extra effort to learn the material and get a good grade. Thus, they won't learn as well, if at all. And if the subject matter isn't taught, well, they're not going to learn at all. So, when we remove the internals that's spaced across the year, the students won't have any reason to study for most of the year, so they won't be as knowledgeable. We view that students' education as the most important thing in this debate, and by removing internals, it would greatly harm the students' motivation to learn and thus impair their education. My second point is that internals provide a greater diversity of knowledge, a more holistic view of students, and they are a fairer system of testing. So firstly, diversity of knowledge. Externals are primarily when you sit down and form another paper. That's what the vast majority of external assessments are. However, whereas internals have a much wider range of assessment styles, that means that students learn more. So the internals can be assessed in any reasonable way the teacher sees fit. So instead of writing out an essay or memorizing answers for past papers, they could learn how to make a speech or a presentation, not to mention more hands-on projects in technology, or when social studies students go down to Parliament. The point I'm trying to make here is that internals teach the students so much more than just regurgitating a rote-learned answer for a paper. It teaches them the vital skills they'll need for the rest of their life. Furthermore, with internals, students can be provided with support and coaching by the teachers to learn and perform better in their exams and gain a better understanding of the actual subject. We see students' education as the singular most important thing in this debate, and internal provides students with the crucial skills they'll need for their future jobs. Secondly, it provides a more holistic view of a student's education. Because internals have a wider range of testing styles, it'll give a more comprehensive picture of how a student performs. And as we said earlier, the teachers aren't going to be looking at the names, they're going to be looking at the material. So as such, they're going to be grading feeling. So if a student who completely understands the material, but is naturally disinclined to doing external sub exams, perhaps they start with high test anxiety, and even with special assessment conditions, they're not going to perform well in their exam. But with internals that have a much wider range of tests, along with a lot of different styles, which show their full understanding of the subject, rather than just a small portion. Thirdly, it's a fairer system of testing. Students from private schools are more often exposed to the style of testing and are taught how to game the system, and such perform better. So by having a wider range of tests, it would give a more comprehensive picture of how students perform, so they can be aptly rewarded. We see this as very important in the debate, as it would go on to decide whether a student's in the accelerated class or not, or whether they're given a scholarship towards a university and other such opportunities. So to conclude, internals will teach the students more, it'll assess them more fairly, despite what the opposition team says. So, as such, the moot shall fall. Thank you.
I'd like to start by addressing some of the things that you're saying. Okay, first of all, your model is fairer. I'm sorry, but you're just delusioned. I love that you've got Mr. Hart. He sounds honestly amazing. But that is not representative of the status quo. That is not representative of the majority of teachers in our education system. Teachers do not mark work blindly. They mark work knowing whose students it is. And this really impacts the marking, as my first speaker outlined for you: bias, prior judgments of the student, expectations, all of that comes into it. They're not marking it blind. And the idea that it's being triple checked, okay, how much time do you really think our teachers have? They don't actually have that much time to triple check every single student's work against other teachers. They just don't. This is just a complete fantasy, and you're just delusioned if you think that they're fairer. Secondly, you talked about motivation. Okay,
The most scientifically proven form of motivation is intrinsic motivation. That's motivation that comes from within ourselves, motivation from doing things that we love, from doing things that we're interested in. May I suggest the reason that you all hate English is actually because it has a really high internal workload. You spend all your time doing dry, monotonous assessments. You're not able to work on things that you actually enjoy, that you're actually passionate about. Under our model, you've got the whole year now. You're not going to have to spend the whole year studying for your exam. You're going to be able to spend large amounts of that time doing things that you love, things that benefit you. Secondly, you talked about a diverse, wide range of assessment. This was the utopian dream of internals. This is what we all wanted, but it's not what we've got. What we've got is internals being extremely similar to externals. I, for example, am taking level 1 history this year. Okay, during the year, I wrote 1 presentation and 2 essays. In my exam, I'm doing 2 essays. It's literally the same thing. It is not a more diverse form of assessment. We see this across subjects, across maths as well. In maths, you do a test for your internal, you do exams for your external. Externals and internals are inherently have the same amount of variety in them. Yes, we totally should be increasing in variety in NCA, but that doesn't mean we have to keep internals. We can increase variety with externals. There's nothing limiting what we have in an external, but we need externals because they're fairer and they're better for students, and that is what we are going to prove to you today. Now onto my substantive point. We must make education nurturing by reducing over-assessment, improving school for students and teachers. Under our current model, school is an experience many would rather forget. This is caused by over-assessment, which is caused by internals, both the quantity and nature of them. It is common for subjects to have 3 to 5 internals each, with large amounts of work required per internal. This leads to over-assessment at a level that would not be present under our model. This is because the amount of work put into an external is limited by time constraints. In comparison, the amount of work put into an internal is, in theory, infinite, and in reality, often extreme. On top of this, our model will reduce assessment to a few set times throughout the year, with students only having to be assessed once for a subject instead of 4 to 6 times. This will benefit the 2 key stakeholders in this debate, students and teachers. Let's start by looking at the most important stakeholder, students. 2 out of 3 NCA students are severely affected by stress or anxiety. A quarter of New Zealand school students suffer from depression, and New Zealand has the highest youth suicide rate in the world. These aren't just statistics, these are our people, these are our future, and they're not coping. Under our current model, school is not enhancing well-being, it is ruining it. Why? Because over-assessment from internals leads to students constantly working on one assessment or another, most likely causing burnout and affecting mental health. By removing externals, we'll be able to dramatically reduce and moderate students' workload. Having externals at one point in the year will mean pressure is limited to certain assessment times, deadlines and dates of assessments are organised carefully, and schools and parents can improve support for students during these assessments. They have the time to do what they do best, teach, inspire, and engage. Without the restricting nature of internals, teachers will be able to modify their learning to students, catering to their needs and interests. On top of this, tackling over-assessment will improve teacher wellbeing. One survey by the Teaching Council noted that a whopping 73% of those leaving teaching were doing so because of workload. Internals are a key source of this workload, and so removing them, stopping teachers from having to mark hundreds of students' work is going to greatly reduce this workload and give them more time to put back into students and make the profession a more desirable one, which I think we can all agree is important. Our students and teachers deserve a system which is effective, nurturing, and fair. We need to let go of the utopian ideals and internals are improving our students' well-being and face the reality that they are hurting our teachers and our tamariki. Pupuwai te kakono ke puwai. Nurture the seed and it will blossom.
And invite the secretary to continue the item of the meeting.
To start off with some rebuttal, for starters, the affirming team has classified that they will be removing internals assessments and either bringing them up towards external assessments or bringing them or keeping them or taking them completely out of the curriculum. If internals are taken completely out of the curriculum, then what is going to happen is all the educational content that is missed during internals will either be scrapped or moved to the externals to just create more workload on that one key month of December where all the exams are being taken place. A first speaker on the affirming team has stated that teachers are biased for students, and this has been quite a key part of their model, that teachers are going to be biased against or for students, but depending on whether they like them or not during different internals because they themselves are marking them. To start off with, while teachers are marking students at their schools internals, teachers are not meant to mark students that they are teaching at the current point in time or teachers that they have taught to recently. And if they are marking a student's internal and a student believes that their internal has been falsely marked by a teacher, even if teachers are going to be spending as much time as they believe they will, it is still important and has to be done that other teachers will go over, as it is a law that teachers have to fully cater for the students' needs and learning. And secondly, NCA provides guidelines for internals for teachers to create, and that also comes in with another point they've created of teachers having too much stress and too high a workload in order to actually learn or in order to teach students that they are going to be taught. And if NCA provides guidelines, and because NCA provides guidelines for internals, teachers only have to write the internals they can spend up to like 5 or 10 minutes writing the internals because that is most of what is said because that is most of what is set by NCA. And if they would like to, they can write an internal system that is completely catered for students. For example, an English teacher could write an internal. It could be in a class that has very different learning standards. Like, for example, if you look at Wellington High School and Wellington College, both schools have a very different atmosphere around the schools how they will learn. So if you're going to try and teach English at Wellington College compared to at Wellington High, you're going to want a very different style of teaching. And these teachers are used to the style of teaching, so they can teach kids in the way that they are meant to be taught at certain different schools. And another point, and based on teachers' bias and making tests easier or harder for students, internals, as they are, they're more personalized. And internals are not getting higher marks because teachers are being biased towards or against students. Internals are getting higher marks for students because they've been catered towards allowing these students to get better grades and to be able to excel because it's what they learn better with, and they're still learning all the educational content they need. They're just getting to learn more and getting to learn enough to get more excellences than merits are achieved on the exams. Another point that was brought up is internals are easier to cheat on during exams. For starters, unless a teacher is completely slacking off, then internals should be just as hard to cheat as externals. And if you are going to go to your brother, there is a lot of there are countermeasures that are created against that. And even if just as the same as for internals, there are external practice assessments that you can take online. And as was shown in the MCAT this year, almost every single question found in some of the MCAT exams were found in previous assessment exams over the years. Another point was that internals are too easy compared to externals, and externals are, of course, a lot harder. For starters, many externals are very, very easy as well as internals, and this point could not be brought across making a complete stereotype of internals and externals, because internals and externals change very frequently and very largely based on where they're being taken, what school they're being taken, or who's creating them, and so on. Another point that was brought up by the affirming team was, and we slightly ran it, but the marked out of 100 system and how it is a GCSE requirement. Just to clear that up, the reason why we believe this is the reason why this is a GCSE requirement is because in NCEA exams are marked down to 24, so it is quite hard to bring that towards 100, and it would just be for simpleness if it was a New Zealand thing marked down to 24. So we believe that is a statistic for GCSE, not NCEA. Now, secondly, teachers the affirming team has brought up that teachers mark work knowing who it is, and teachers are not marking the work due to who it is, as they usually are completely separate teachers that have never met the student before, or a student can make appeal, as I said earlier on. All right, now on to my points. For starters, internals provide less academically inclined students with the opportunity for teacher aids during their exams. So they can't be coached by the teachers to learn more. Furthermore, internals give the teachers the opportunity to teach more applicable skills for the exams, whereas externals have to teach a wider range of skills, some of which won't actually be needed for their exams. Internals allow students to get more help by their teachers because their teachers are with them, making sure they need everything they need. And while there are special assessment standards for externals, like for example, people with bad handwriting can use a computer, or people with dyslexia or problems of reading what they're trying to read can have somebody assisting them with knowing what they need to know. When internals are taken, there are teachers that know exactly what is going to be needed to help these students and help them learn better. And internals are able to be used to completely fix all of this. Now, second point, which is based on the fact that teachers are removed, based on the fact that there is a lot of internal content that, if removed, will need to go somewhere, whether it is end of the year crammed in for externals or at the start of the year crammed in normal. This was a point that was briefly brought up by the funding stream, but to elaborate, by moving all the internals to clash with externals, they'll be around. Okay. Thank you for the debate.
Yeah, thank you for speak for their speech and invite Lasagna Fernando to close the substantive speeches.
Throughout this debate, the affirming team has given you a system that will bring joy back into teaching and learning. A system that will have much more equitable outcomes and will overall have the greatest positive benefit for everyone involved. The negating team has made three main arguments throughout this debate. And what I'm going to do is talk you through each of these points and explain why they don't serve the best interests of the key stakeholders in this debate, the students and the teachers, and why ANU model does. Now, first of all, I need to explain to you all how internals actually work. And that is that internals are internally set assessments set by teachers that differ from school to school, from teacher to teacher. They are mocked by teachers. This mocking method differs from school to school, from teacher to teacher. You cannot say that your maths teacher or your English teacher mocks your internals blindly. That does not speak to every teacher in the nation, because there's literally no way of moderating that. That's how internals work. The point. Okay. So your first key point was that motivation, right? That if we take internals away, that's gonna lead to students lacking motivation. Well, that is an issue. We are so over-assessing our students. That is not how we should take motivation from our students. That's not how we encourage motivation. We should encourage intrinsic motivation from within. There is more motivation. Basically, there should be more motivation of the process, how we get there, than the end result. All of our motivation should not be based upon what we get for our internal exams, because it's not right. That's not how it works in the real world. That's just not how it works. Currently, 70% of students are undermotivated. External motivation is not working for them. The way internals say, it's not working for them, right? We should be encouraging our students to be motivated through work, not through results. And then you also said that internals are more broad. There's a more broad scope of knowledge in internals. That's actually not true. Internals actually, there's a narrower way. They actually narrow down the skills in which students learn from internals, because teachers teach to assessments. Teachers use the same exact assessments over and over again. Studies have found that internals are easier because of the narrow scope of knowledge used in internals. It is very thin scope of knowledge, because this is how teachers do it. They teach to assessments, because internals, there is no way of knowing if a teacher will teach to externals or internals or not, and that's a bad thing. And then moving on to a second point, that internals can be catered to students. That's a bad thing. That's our whole point. Internals cannot be catered to students. That's the problem. It leads to students not learn. It leads to internals being much too easy for students because they're being taught to the internal, and that simply doesn't assess the students correct. It doesn't test the students' scope of knowledge because they already know what's going to be in the assessment. So it's not going to test them. It's not going to test their quick thinking skills. It's not going to test. It's not going to test their weight. It's not going to test their knowledge. It's gonna test what their teachers taught them and how they taught it, and if their teachers told them if what the internals have. And you also and speaking on that point, how are you gonna know if your brother didn't hand in the same work as you handed in your internals? Teachers could be reusing the work set in internals because that's like there's no way of moderating that. You also said that teachers recheck marks with other teachers, right? You give it around. That is not an effective method of moderating results from internals. It's just simply not. That method is ineffective. Even though teachers can also submit, you said that teachers can submit grades to NZQA. Teachers choose which grades they submit to NZQA. And when NZQA gives their results back, a lot don't choose to change that grade. There's no moderation involved in that. In 2006, 29% of last year's, in 2006, 29% of the year's internally assessed NCA work was sent in from checking, was not marked at the national standard, and they were given back, and yet the teachers did not change that marking, which led to many students getting the wrong internal grade because they were not changed. It was the teachers just simply marked the wrong thing. They did not mark it right. And even after NZQA told them to mark it right, they didn't change it. Switching to an all external model would prevent that obstacle because teachers aren't marking the assessments. There is real moderation in external marking. There is a panel of people that are moderating it. There is a group of people that are saying whether or not your thing is right. So in conclusion, the best thing we can do for our students is to revolutionize the way we currently assess and switch to an all external mode. Internals are just too broken, and therefore we strongly believe that the moot must stand and we should switch to an all external model. Thank you.
And invite the big speaker of Wellington College, Bill.
The authority of the House has formed a case based on the idea that a big test at the end of the year says every single student will somehow encourage people to be more motivated and be more interested in their subjects, rather than having tests that are actually catered for them or their interests. And not to mention, they claim to speak for teachers and yet seem to characterize them as racist, biased bigots who don't care about education and are going to cheat with no blocks on that. Now, we on the negating side of the House have identified three major points of clash. Firstly, which external or internal is more fair, and also about how that helps with the credentials, the stress levels of students and teachers, and how motivated are the students. Now, firstly, on which thing is more fair. The major point for the affirming team was that teachers are biased, and this means that test writing and subject and marking will be unfair. Now, we characterize teachers in this House as not racist. So we do not believe that things like racial bias and bigotry will be a big part of teachers. As teachers, you don't go to teaching for money. You go to teaching because you care about students, you care about their education. If you're going to be doing that, you want your students to succeed. And in the rare cases you may have teachers who do have ulterior motives or negative. There is absolutely a checks and balances for that. There's a very, very clear process which you can appeal grades, and that does go through multiple teachers. So there's absolutely no way you can argue that there's one teacher with absolute power, when there is clear ways that if you think you're being graded unfairly, you can be checked by other teachers if your teacher is somehow biased. And another point was the idea that if you cater tests to students, then it becomes easier for some students and harder for others. But there are still national standards for these things. You can't just write an easy paper. There's still ways you have to mark things. Make sure it's still difficult, it's still challenging, it still demonstrates how your knowledge. But the crucial point is here that teachers can make their tests more relevant to their students, not just in terms of teaching them the right things, but what they might see, what things to make sense for them. Like a person who lives in Auckland has a very different view on life and understanding of life than a person living in a rural area. And so a teacher in a rural area can adjust their testing to ask questions that seem more relevant, make kids actually understand what they're being asked, rather than just being some theoretical, which is definitely what NCA has been trying to do. And also they also had this point about NCA being bad credentials because of outside international bodies. But in fact, it's actually a stated goal of NCA to not just do best for grading internationally, but we want to be making our students better members of society, better contributors to the community. So yes, we have negatives to the international stage, but that's not our entire students' goal. NCA does not cater to some international body. We are for our own students, for our own country and people. So we believe that some minor problems with that are made up for by the interests of society and the fact that it makes our students better members of our community. And then the second major point of clash was the idea of stress levels. And the affirmative side of the house says that having tests throughout the year increases stress because then you're always got a test coming up and this is a bad thing. But we say that having a bit of stress throughout your year is normal for human. Everyone has that. That's primal. You'll always have stress about when you're going to have your next meal or anything like that. There's always going to be a bit of stress in your life. That's normal for a human being. But under the affirming sides model, you're going to have all that stress of that entire year piled into this little area at the very end of the year. And without internals, they must, unless they want to actually disadvantage students in the future, they're going to have to put more stuff at the end. So when you have all this year of just doing random stuff, you're not actually going to have no stress during this whole part of the year. But you have enormous amounts of stress, extreme stress situations where people are just going hard out, grinding to try and get these grades, which is not good for students' mental health. And they also brought up a minor point, which is that teachers it would align teachers' workloads throughout the year, which we agree that there should be ways to light teachers' workloads. But we believe there are much better ways to light teachers' workloads that don't actively damage our children's educations throughout their college years. There are ways that we can adjust the current system, because as we said in the first speaker, we do support reform of the system. We just don't believe this radical reform is the way to do it at all. And then the final point of clash was about motivation. And the fun side of the house is the best way to motivate people is to let them do what they love. And yes, this is true, but unfortunately, that's not how school works. You can't just do what you love, because most kids don't love their subjects, even their favorite subjects. They don't adore them, and there has to be ways that you. And if you're just trying to say they should do what they're interested in, they're never going to be achieving things they need to do. Life isn't all about doing what you're interested in. You need to have success, and you need to be able to do things that are hard or that you're not as interested in, because they give you the learning experiences you need for the rest of your life, and they give you those, and they give you those credentials. So the idea that somehow all students are going to be magically motivated, they're going to be much more motivated because their tests are more fun by having a sit-down test at the end of the year rather than lots of new different styles of teaching. Like, as we said, the kids in social studies classes can go to Parliament and all that sort of thing. So those are a lot more fun, I say, than sitting down and testing a hall at the end of the year. So there are huge benefits. And we believe, so yes, this is why the moot must fall.
And as is customary at this point of the debate, speech is between 3 minutes, so more at 2 girls at 3. And at this point, I'll leave that to sum up.
So where you see this debate coming down to 3 major points of clash. Firstly, whether having internals and externals versus solely externals is fairer, whether it motivates students better, and how it relates to stress. So firstly, fairness. You talked about how there are racist teachers who are biased. Now, we disprove this point 7 ways. Firstly, we classify that the majority of teachers don't want to be racist. They're not racist. They got into teaching because they love it, and they're doing teaching because they want to educate the student population, not scar those of colour or of a different gender. We also talked about how work is all double-checked. Everything's moderated by their peers. We also talked about how subconscious bias can be battled by simply not looking at the name on the paper. We also talked about how students can appeal, not just to the schools, but also to NCEA itself, the Ministry of Education. And we also talked about how the NCEA does examine all of this work. The Ministry of Education will examine if they think there is any issues and how the school is performing. And there are guidelines by NCEA on how they're going to have to create their exams. You also talked about standards to be biased and personal gain. As we said earlier, the tests are triple checked, they're examined by NCEA, and they have guidelines to perform to. They simply can't make it stupidly easy so they look good. So the second point is motivation. You talked about how people should learn what they want to do, and that's really the magical, natural curiosity of people is what's going to carry them through their life. We completely disagree. We think that people are going to have to learn about subjects they're not going to enjoy. Like we said earlier with English, they're going to have to learn about these crucial skills, but they might not enjoy it. Here's where the motivation of tests comes in. They need to learn about something they're going to enjoy. And here is a test getting bad grades. Here's a real world punishment. There are always going to be deadlines. And one example of this is tests, and you need to learn about that early. And then the final point of clash is stress. You said, let's not have any stress. Let's all have one big exam at the end of the year. Now, as my third speaker said, this is even going to be worse for stress. Having one big exam at the end of the year, everyone is going to be madly cramming for the same exam. There's going to be more stress. All the harms you talk about for your mental health, about having exams across the year, that's all going to be bundled up into one big nasty mental health problem at the end of the year. So as we can see, we have won all 3 of these points of clash, and as such, we have won the debate, and the moot shall fall. Thank you.
So I thought this debate come down to 3 clear points of clash: whether it was going to be fair or not, whether it was going to be better for students' education, and whether it was going to be better for students themselves. So let's start by looking at whether it's going to be fairer or not. So they somehow told us that it is going to be fairer on their side. They provided no evidence as to how it's going to be fairer on their side. We have proved to you that on our side, the setting of tasks is going to be moderated by NCEA. The marking of tasks is going to be done blindly so as to eliminate any unconscious bias as well as conscious bias and preference, and that the teaching of tasks will not be able to be taught to assessments as it is currently with internals. As well as proving that externals are going to be fairer, we also prove to you that internals are intrinsically unfair by talking about the unconscious biases that teachers hold, the racial prejudice that people hold, the expectations that teachers hold of students, and the way that they may set tasks that are favourable to their students, as well as the inequability across the overall system. Therefore, I believe we have won this point by proving that not only will externals be fairer, but internals are intrinsically unfair. Now moving on to the second point of clash, that it will be better for their education. Now, they've tried to prove to us that internals offer more variety and a wider scope. They've offered this utopian ideal of internals, where we have discussed with you the reality of internals, the fact that teachers are able to teach 2 assessments, the fact that the narrow nature of internals focus on such specific skills, that the combination of this leads to students actually learning very little knowledge, becoming too specialised and focusing on one subject. We have also proved to you that moving to externals will mean teachers have to teach a broader range because they don't know exactly what will be covered in the exams. They have They have also tried to tell you that you can have more variety types of assessments, whereas we have proved to you that the variety is similar across both models and can be improved under both models. But under our model, you are going to be fairer, you're going to be weller, and you're going to have learned more. Now, onto the final point of clash, whether it will be better for students or not. They've tried to tell you that they're going to be unmotivated and that this big stress at the end of the year is going to be a problem. Whereas we've told you that under our current model, our students are suffering, that under our current model, our students are under constant pressure, that under our model, students are under a pressure cooker environment that is leading to burnout, under motivation, and decreased well-being, while proving to you that under our new model, they will be more motivated because they won't be burnt out, they won't be under constant pressure, and they'll be able to explore things that they love, even if that's just the mode of assessment. In conclusion, we have proved to you that removing internals is going to allow us to have a fairer, more nurturing education system that is going to be better for students and teachers. Therefore, the moot must stand.
At this point, our educators will retire somewhere. I'm not sure where. Is there a space? To confer. And can I quickly touch base with the two coaches to see if you've got other members of the team about
Well done. Thank you. Masks. Oh, guys, the COVID, the horrible people.
She's watching you. Hello, everyone. Oh, hello, Harry. Is anyone still there? Two people there. No one here. There's only two people. Anyone out there? 11. So anyway.
There's been 3 of them.
Yeah, gets me invented, we'll see.
Very embarrassing. Could you help? I've been trying to open it and I don't want to break it.
No, I know, and I had trouble the other day. Yeah, should we just let me just plug in my phone?
Okay, guys.
You haven't got any spares on you, I suppose. Pardon? You haven't got any spare spares of these, have you? I haven't got any. We've got none out there, so I'll need to tell Prem to send 2 more for these guys. But we'll do all the girls because there's 2 other members in each team. Okay. And after all, they've contributed. So I've told Benji and Yaxby that I'll get Brooke to send some more for each week because it's really close to here. But then they can come up with those. Yeah. Oh, I'm happy to write. Okay, I'll come get you. Yeah, come get me when you're ready. I think there's senior suitors on tonight somewhere, and the senior Prem B and senior Prem A are done.
Oh, they are.
And junior suits next week.
And who won the senior Prem?
I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, that's. I was wondering if they were going to get done because I thought ours must be coming, but they've got to get the senior ones done first.
Yes, well, it was my suggestion to Brooke.
Yeah,
Do the
right.
seniors first, and then we'll deal with the juniors.
Yeah.
And then you know, I would have done it at St Catherine's for a neutral venue, but since Paul
it's fine.
offered,
Well, I think we offered on the same day, so that was quite good. Yeah. Oh, that's good. Oh no, I thought it was good. Oh, this is a lovely people. So they don't get any contact voice. It's not bad.
that's nice.
I love it.
We are facing Arthur, and I was saying social media again, and he said that he's about to stay. We said it's fine, but we said that this one Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I did brown.
Oh my God. I would love to wait.
The idea of like two. How's the 2 meters apart going, guys? Yeah, awesome, cool. Happy for you. Okay.
And how's the rest of the world here? How's Emma? Yeah.
Yeah. Are we back? Yeah, we're back.
No, they want me.
Oh no, they want you want Kevin. No, don't don't no. No.
Yeah, no, I support Dragon. Yeah.
Okay, I think you indicated what's coming back.
Hold on, that thing is not water, Yesenia. So then you have to
It's to go, Aaron. I thought you said it once.
I'm gonna go to the dog.
You're too shy.
Oh, yes. So you enjoy the fashion.
The dog.
Oh, no, no, come here.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody knows.
We're not going to do a rapid result. Maya, to the stop.
Oh, yes, we have that.
Yeah, and we got some dead.
We have actually.
I don't know. It just only that way. Yeah, I think you couldn't get the win. You could just win.
Yeah.
You weren't good enough. You weren't good enough. There's one competition number.
How are they going to just wait to hear the result? But guys,
Yeah, you did really well. Without really well, you done really well. Excuse me.
I feel like this one was an expert.
I best I just to myself. High five.
oh my god. What did you finish back?
But
Yeah, I think we just have like the most.
I just take this couch over out. Just so. What? Just
And I'm going to come and speak my heart of the education panel.
Hi everyone, thank you for what was a really great debate. The panel thought it was extremely high quality, lots of great arguments raised, which was reflected in the fact that it was a split decision. So in a 2-1 decision, it was given to the third team.
Oh, that's it.
Excitement is helpful, but just to acknowledge as well, team, Benji and Gatsby. We haven't got quite enough certificates yet from the Wellington Speaking Union, but we will get those to you via the junior cert final next week. And thank you so much to our coaches, but also thank you very much to our educators.
Very true.
Final debates. So, thank you so much, guys. Much appreciated.
Can I give good feedback here? Just like
I can stand next to my
Thank you so much.
thank you.
One more year. Then I'll see. I'll finish teaching next year.
Oh, sorry, yeah, sorry.
Is there a chance we can have feedback for our
We'll do it once. Lots of situations really well. I think the thing to say, and I think the thing that probably helps to create split is that this bit was kind of hard to judge because neither team kind of engaged other individuals for XYZ reasons. So, same material and no one did like a large amount of work to say this material is important and the general material is really. So, I would say most important material is in fact in terms of taking the students because there's a broad range of work and there's a broad range of
Okay, I'll be right.
Understand. So, just as an example, and the result of that is that if you live rurally, like you guys said, if you live like in a community, so that's how you make that more important by saying that like in community art would like to be served whilst they're like integrated.
Yes.
Already have like a trend of
Bye. Well done, girls. Congratulations. Super.
I'm a great believer in
That's amazing. It's like a disaster for everybody. And the team anything to add to that, Peter?
Not really.
Cool.
I think
All right. Very good. Right, guys. Let's get the yeah.
And I'll get Brooke to send more
Cool.
certificates for your boys. Thanks so much, Lauren.
Is more important.
Your
You
break's
guys
done,
were
isn't it?
really good at
It's on the last
but
subject. So
in any debate, both sides will
Who's
prove
it?
something.
Oh.
And so if we can
Someone's on that.
Your
it
school.
just makes it
My
way easier.
school. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to make it as easy as possible for the judge to make their
I'll send all
decision.
this through
And
to
you want to
Brooke
make it
and
as
I'll
easy
send
as
it to
possible
the
for the judge to
Great.
and that's all. Thank you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Do you have any questions on that?
Thank you. Thanks very much.
I think that's just something that is general and easy enough to understand. We don't sit down and implement it next time.
Which is also something we'd normally be giving us feedback in like a high level
We said
senior
that a lot,
planning
yeah.
final,
Yeah.
not like high level senior planning, like the level of this debate is
Oh, very good.
like miles higher than what would normally be at a junior level, which is why it came down to things that are like not often the kind of thing that we'd need to be thinking about